It's Friday. It's the holiday week. I don't know about you guys, but we've been to the country showdown out here in Vernal. We went to the rodeo last night. I've got another rodeo I'm going to on Saturday. We've had fireworks. The 4th of July was really fun. The F-35s flying over uh, Main Street on the parade. Anyway, it's been a fun week for the holiday stuff and lots of cool things going on. I hope you guys have had a good week as well, and it's good to have you all here. So let's. I'm going to pick on Shantae because she hasn't been here for a while, so I'm going to pick on her and see if she will read our culture piece, especially since she's had some stuff to do with this in the beginning. So let me pull it up here. When you can see it, you can read it.
Okay, give back, changing people's lives. Do you like getting involved with your community? Do you enjoy contributing your time to charitable causes? Then we have a great news to share with you. SMART's fantastic community-centric initiative called the Smart Resource Give Back program, where we change people's lives.
And is that true, Shantae?
Yes,
You
absolutely.
you were kind of spearheading it in the very beginning and
Yeah.
kind of got us started. So how many of you had an opportunity in some way to participate in the give back program, whether it was your time or your money or whatever? Anybody have a opportunity to do that?
I did.
Yeah. Um, so some cool things. I know we have some more new things. And isn't Mariah the one that's over that now for this
She
year?
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's the chairperson this year.
good. So cool things. Appreciate everybody, wanting to help and participate, and I think it's been really good. So that's part of our culture piece, part of what we do, and it makes a huge difference in others' lives. A lot of you have great experiences in helping change people's lives by getting them out on jobs and having them make money for their family and do that sort of thing. But this is just an added bonus that we do to give both money and time back to these um, community projects. So great job. We don't read that one very often, but hey, I wanted to share that today. So today we're on chapter 9 in the 9 Lies About Work. Chapter 9 is about leadership as a thing, and I'm not going to steal any of his thunder. I have Kyle, and Kyle, I looked on the agenda. It looks like you're on for next week too for terminations and those sorts of things. Well, I'll pull it up here in just towards the end, and we'll take a look. So but chapter 9, hopefully we'll have a great discussion on what leadership is and what leadership is not. And then Kyle's also going to talk about performance reviews and whatever else he's got in that whole mix of that piece. Um, so I'm going to turn the time over to him, and I'll jump in on a few things as well. And also, please participate, everybody, and share your comments and ask questions. That's what we're here for. So, Kyle, it is yours right now.
Okay, very interesting chapter. When I first saw the outline, I thought I'm going to be teaching about leadership. I immediately, my mind went to a bunch of leadership models, and I've got a ton of those, and they're interesting to me, I guess. But and and then as I'm kind of reviewing this chapter, I'm like, wait a minute, leadership isn't a thing. And so yeah, I'm going to teach you all about leadership today, and we're going to go home and we're going to be great leaders by next week, right?
That's right.
Exactly. No, actually, Carrie's right. I'm going to need everybody's help with this because I think today we're going to learn what leadership is from each of our perspectives. And to kind of just start out, what stood out to you in the chapter? And I'm going to start with Ivan. Ivan, what stood out to you in this chapter?
I sincerely apologize, Kyle. I am not there just yet, but
Okay.
I'm doing my best to catch up. Unfortunately, you know how things are going right now.
That's quite okay. Thanks, Simon. And yes, I know there's a bit to catch up on here. So, how about Ashley Hossein? What stood out to you in the chapter?
Okay, so I think I'm a little confused. For today's chapter, didn't we have line number 8?
Okay.
No? Sorry, I missed the last 2 classes. And last night
Okay.
I stayed until 12 a.m. reading this chapter.
The email did say chapter 8 or line
It
number
did?
8.
That's why I got confused because
Oh,
see, Carrie, it's your fault.
it is my fault. If I put that in,
I
that's
went
terrible.
back. I always go back to your email to, to guide myself. And then I opened line number, because today we were going to be in truth number 13. And I did my homework.
But I gave you the wrong assignment.
Okay.
I can talk about line number 8.
How many of us studied line number 8? And how many of us studied line number 9 today? I got 9. Okay. And 8. All right.
So Techie had his hand up.
For line 9 and
Yep.
Ashley Labor, line 9, right? Maddie, line 9. Okay. Shane, okay. Jason. And I have a bunch of others I can't really see. So well, let me come down to Shane. Shane, what stood out to you in this chapter?
I liked a statement that was said as we follow people who give us confidence in the future.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge. I know that's huge, right? It's a clear direction and it's getting everyone on that same direction and giving them motivation on how we're going to get there.
Yep, absolutely. Love that. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, very interesting chapter. You look at all these leaders. I like that he went and listed a bunch of leaders like Warren Buffett, Steve Jobs, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, all these things. And you look at them and you think they're the most well-rounded person and that they have all the leadership qualities they need. But you dive deep into their personal life and their history, and they made all sorts of mistakes. And so it's just no leader is perfect is what I got out of it, and some amazing stories to go along with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the thing that I most got out of it is that leadership can't be defined very easily, if at all, right? And yet it's very important and it must exist, right?
Kyle. So, and I,
Yes, go ahead,
I was gonna say the same thing. That's the one big thing is leadership isn't a thing, but followership is a thing, and that's the one that can be measured where leadership cannot, but followership can.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Go ahead, Techie.
Yeah, and along those lines too, it's all about the end of it. It's all about your relationships. The interaction between the leader and followers is based on the strength of the relationship between the leader and a follower, and that's really what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that leadership is, well, probably many things that leadership is not. One of those things is that it's not a list of a bunch of things that we can go and study, and then we can graduate from leadership school, and voila, we're these great leaders, right? And yet we spend how much is it? $14 billion in the leadership development industry, and does that really move the needle much? Don't know. Probably not. So then what is it?
I have another comment.
Go ahead, Carrie.
So John Maxwell, who's, he's the big leadership guy, right? If you see his definition, it matches really closely to what we're talking about. He says leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. So we've had great leaders in the world, and we've had leaders like Hitler, for example, was a leader, and he had millions of followers. Was he great? No. Or a good person? No. But he was a leader that had many, many followers. So leadership is just influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I've taught this before. As a leader, if you look behind you and there's nobody following you, you're not a leader. So leaders, have to have followers, and followers can be measured.
Yeah, I agree. You're not a leader if no one's following. And maybe it's as bad of a question as the other is, how can we improve followership? Any ideas there?
Okay, so I have something to say. So a part in the chapter that I liked was when he was talking about it's really not about the qualities of the leaders, it's about the feeling that they invoke in the people that are following them. And so I'll give an example. I had a really good leader in the past, and it was exactly that. It was someone that when I came to work, I knew whether he was in the office or out of town, or, he didn't even live in the state, but I knew he was always like cheerleading for us. He was always behind us. He always had our back. He had nothing but good, positive things to say about his team. And if anyone from any of the other branches said otherwise, he was the first to be there to defend us and make sure that, he set the record straight and all of that kind of stuff. And it was just every time he came into town, it was just a feeling. We knew he was there to support us, to encourage us. It was refreshing to have him around. He would go above and beyond and do things not only just for me, but to let me know that he cared about me personally, not just professionally. Like one example that comes to mind is Mariah, when she was younger, she was into art and she wanted to join an art competition. And I had mentioned it to him. And the next time he came in town, he brought a whole bunch of art supplies and said, hey, give these to your daughter. I want to encourage her to continue what she's doing with her art. And then he continued to provide supplies. Every time he would come in town, he would bring Mariah some art supplies. He didn't know her. He didn't, he wasn't invested in her, but he was invested in me. And it was the feeling that he gave me that made me think he was a good leader. And so I wanted to follow him. I wanted to take his direction. I trusted him, so it is about the feeling that we create and how we make people feel, not really just what we bring to the table or the strategies or the game plans and the things that we lay out for them. It's more than that. It's how do they feel being led by us,
Absolutely. Thanks,
Thanks,
Shante.
Shante. That was good.
Maria, you got your hand up.
I do, even in real life. I'm like, hey, don't forget about me. I was just going to piggyback off what Shante said, because I do believe that as a leader, we lead by example. If our team is watching us do it and they believe in what we're speaking, then they're going to do it. I haven't had many jobs in my life. Like SMART is like my third job in my whole life. But I've been really lucky to work around people who have been great leaders. I always go back to Kyle, and no, he does not pay me to hype him up every week. But like on our one-on-one on Wednesday, he was like, hey, so what are you working on? And right now I have a full plate. And he was like, okay, what do you need me to take over? How can I help you? And if Kyle didn't care, he'd be like, well, that's her job. I have my own job to do, but he's a great leader. He cares about what his team is doing and not doing. So that's my feedback.
Thank you, Maria.
And Joe had his hand up as well.
Oh, I don't see Joe on my screen. He must be on screen too. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I didn't have my hand up anymore, but
okay.
I always have something to say, right? I think it might be helpful. If you have your book in front of you, maybe let's go to page 214, because this is right where Kyle is at. Page 214, 9 Lies About Work in this chapter. At the very last section here, it says, at the very bottom, this is probably really helpful for us to kind of pick up from too. A leader is someone who has followers. You know, everyone's kind of hitting on this, right? The only determinant of whether anyone is leading or whether anyone else is following is whether or not they have a leader. They called it a litmus test in this, right? So this may seem like an obvious statement until we recall how easily we overlook this implication. Followers, their needs, and this is what Shantae was saying, right? Followers, why do they follow? It's what is it? Their needs, their feelings, their fears and hopes are strangely absent when we speak of leaders as examples of strategy, unless you just hear what Shantae and Maria just said, right? It was about how their leaders made them feel, and I thought that was an interesting thing, right? So are strangely absent when we speak of leaders as examples of strategy, execution, vision, oratory, relationships, charisma, and so on. The idea of leadership is missing the idea of followers, is missing the idea that our subject is here at heart a question of particularly human relationships, namely why anyone would choose to devote their energies to and take risks on behalf of someone else. And so I was like, thinking about this, I'd kind of kick this out to you guys and ask an interesting question that says, why have you followed the people you have followed? And we always think of that as terms of, great examples of leaderships, but I also think of this in terms of our parents, right? It cracks me up because I see this in my family, and we have a particular part of our family that it literally goes every other one. And it's just interesting because one kid, says, this is how I want it. And then, their kid says, I don't want it that way. And so they do it this other way. And it just kind of cracks me up that we do it by contrast and examples, but at the same time, why is it that you follow who it is that you follow? And back over to you, Kyle, just something fun to add to what Shantae and what Maria were saying.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, you're right with my right where I was on my presentation here, and I appreciate that comment. I think another thing to just point out is that leaders are oftentimes deficient in things. They don't have the whole complete skill set or are well-rounded or whatever. They have shortcomings. They're imperfect. There's imperfections. Steve Jobs probably had a little bit of a, when he bought a car every 6 months so he wouldn't have to pay parking tickets on an unregistered car, right? There are quirky things, I think, in a lot of leaders too. And but there are also things that leaders are very passionate about. The word is kind of spiky, right? Spiky, as it's said in the book. It's interesting to me that we tend to follow leaders because of their eccentricities and their spikiness and their things that they're passionate and sometimes even overly passionate about. Can anyone think of an example of spikiness that they have followed in a leader?
Well, I have a story. So when I first started in the company, there was a point where obviously I was receiving other offers, right? So I received a very good offer and I was about to leave the company. And then I do remember that Belinda came to me and she started talking to me. And she told me, I do remember Kyle, you did it too. Belinda did it too. And then I was in a point where I was like, okay, this is a tough one, right? What should I do? So the only thing that made me stay here was knowing the type of leader I was going to be dealing with. So I was still going to be working with you, Kyle. I was still going to be working with Carol, still going to be working with Belinda. And looking at Belinda, when she told me, because obviously I always see all of you guys, right? Even if I wasn't in trades, I can see always that passion that Belinda would always have with her team. And after a couple of months, of course, I told the truth to Belinda because she was like, tell me the truth. I know you have something else. Please tell me the truth. When I told her, then she looked at me and she was like, then why did you stay? Why did you prefer working with me? I was like, because you're a great leader, because I trust you, because I know you're passionate, and because I know that I'm going to be able to grow a lot because you take of your time. And I love how this company always has all these trainings. And even if I'm gaining more money or more other things, me gaining that experience and being able to work with a team I have right now, that is something that no one could ever buy. So yes, for me, it's very important to always decide to have a good leader, because I have been in other teams too where I had to work with leaders that they're just so, everything is so difficult and everything could turn so toxic and it makes you feel so bad. And I did this for 3 years in Panama in a big construction company I was working for. And having that experience, then that helped me to decide, like to make a very good decision. And I'm happy I stayed.
And Belinda is kind of spiky.
You stole it from me, Carrie. For me, in that same vein with Belinda, one of the spikes she has is integrity. And she knows, she's a straight arrow man, so she knows what's the right thing to do, and that's what she's going to do. And even if you don't necessarily agree with it, that's the deal, right? And so for me, that really aligned with my values and made it easier to follow. I knew that it was going to be a straight arrow, even if I didn't necessarily like it.
You know, I'm just very misunderstood.
Right.
So have you guys seen those commercial, like the Sour Punch kids? Like they're sour, then they're sweet. That's Belinda. Belinda will like tell you the truth, and she'll like stand there and she'll tell you to your face, but then she'll be like, you know what? I apologize. I shouldn't have come off that way. Like, you're still my buddy. I still care for you. So she's a Sour Punch kid.
But while we're on the Belinda subject, I'll say that Belinda is a pain in the butt.
Okay.
And she refuses to fail, and that's what I love about her. She
Wait.
just keeps at it and keeps
Who else
at
can
it.
jump on this? We're having fun with you, Belinda. I think this is great.
Let's just have a Belinda beat up fest. Why don't we? It's Friday. Well, lucky for all of you guys, my skin's about that thick.
I love it.
And I'm probably stronger than all of you, and I'll probably beat up all of you because, you know, I grew up with 2 older brothers who used to bully me. And so I used to be their slave until I was about 9 years old. And I don't know what happened, but something snapped. And I was like, right, that's it. And I was like, bam. And ever since then, I beat them up every time they tried to bully me. And then I turned into a brat. Funny how that works. But anyway, so.
Thanks, everybody. Some of the notes I have here is that were really good from the book is why do we follow? The leader generates a feeling and understands and while at the same time the feeling that our leader knows and values. Sorry, my notes are a little scrambled here. Values us for who we are as a unique individual. So I think that's a big part of it. Our leader understands us as a unique individual. I think it's a really tough thing to do for a lot of people, is to truly understand us on an individual level. and sees the best in us. We follow leaders who connect us to a mission we believe in, who clarify what's expected of us, who surround us with people who define excellence the same way we do. Well, speaking of the followers, right? And who value our strengths. We know leadership when we see it. It's a set of feelings in a follower rather than a set of characteristics in a leader. And no two leaders do this the same way. And I think that's just interesting. And I've often taught from leadership models and things. There's a ton of them in the whole body of human resources. They're interesting. It's like music theory, right? You learn music theory, but that doesn't necessarily teach you to make a song. But yet they're pretty boxy too. And people are far more nuanced than any kind of model could really put forth. And so I think a leader needs to understand those details in people. Another one, in the real world, your ability creates the outcomes you want in your followers is tied to how seriously and intelligently you can cultivate your own idiosyncrasy. Idiosyncrasy, kind of your own little quirks, I guess, your own little distinct things about you. And basically, we've got to be ourselves in leadership, our human selves, and let the things that we're passionate about flow, rather than being boxed into some leadership model or trying to be something that we're not. That becomes unauthentic. So we really follow these spiky leaders for their spikes, their true self, their true passions.
Kyle, I think that's a great point too, is that, everybody here is very unique. We have people who are drivers, people who are analytical, people who are expressive. Everybody's got these different personalities, and we have our strengths finder test assessments to help us understand our team. And I think that, that's the whole point behind this, is that we're not, we have a culture in our company that we can all kind of grab onto, and that culture says, hey, look, we're planting our flag. We want to help people grow and develop in this company and get this people thing right. But getting it right means we have to understand the different uniqueness of each person and each individual here. I mean, I look at everybody here and I go, man, this person leads in a different way than that person, but they still have, this team that follows and they love them and so on. I just think it's great that we all have this uniqueness. We're not in a box, but we can still accomplish the same mission and same goal by bringing to the table all of these talents and uniqueness that we have.
Absolutely. Shane spoke to this a little bit earlier on page 219, if you guys have the physical book. What does this statement mean? You're charged with rallying your team toward a better future, yet many are fearful of this future, and this fear isn't unjustified, it's adaptive. Your greatest challenge as a leader then is to honor each person's legitimate fear of the unknown, and at the same time to turn that fear into spiritedness. What do we get from that?
I think the fear comes from fear of failure, right? That it's our responsibility to help guide and drive people to see not just the company vision, but our vision as well, and our vision for success. But looming in the back of your head, you're worried about that failure, right? What if I guide people in the wrong direction?
Yeah. And I also just, the future is uncertain. Nobody knows what's going to come, right? And a leader that communicates confidence in the future brings an antidote to that uncertainty. And I think that is a real key thing. Now, how to do that, there's no instructions on how to do that. It's just that is something that great leaders do. Jason, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, so I just want to comment on that. So I've had two different leaders since I've been here. I had Carrie and now I have Shane, and they're both totally different in their own respects. I mean, Carrie likes to live in Vernal, which, I don't know anybody who wants to live in Vernal, but and then you have Shane who shaves his mustache like a 70s porn star. So, two different ends of the spectrum. But the one thing that's constant between these two is I can come to them with their fears, with my fears, sorry, and they both are so positive about life, about where we're at, where we're going. I've never once doubted myself that I could do it, because they always reassure me when I come to them and say, man, what's going on this month? The things aren't hitting, people aren't signing. What are we doing? Things like that. They're always calm and they're always positive. So that's one thing I love.
Awesome. Ashley, labor.
Yeah, for me, this resonated a little bit as similar to parenting, right? So your kids don't know what's going on in the world. Everything's bigger, scarier, but and it's your job to help encourage them, so that way, it's going to be okay. You have to impart that to them and help them see like, hey man, I know this looks scary, but we can jump over this. It's fine. And I feel like as a leader, that's something that we can bring as well. It's not infantilizing anyone, but it's you see what they don't, and it's your job to help bridge that gap for them, and it helps give them that confidence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Kind of my conclusion to all this is I think great leaders have high emotional intelligence and have an instinct for people. Great leaders have an ability to understand how people feel and genuinely care for people. At the same time, they can prioritize company needs and simultaneously connect the priorities of people and priorities of company and connect those two together. I think that's a special skill that a good leader has.
Kyle, John Martinez had his hand up as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't see John on my screen. Go for it, John. I'm on one screen here, guys. I'm sorry.
Hello, Kyle. Yeah.
Go for it.
No worries. No worries. No, I was actually going to say pretty much a little bit of what Ashley had said. It's usually fear. The fear that your team has is fear of the unknown, because you might have a vision, or you might have been imparted, given part of the vision of where the company's going to go, but the people under you don't necessarily know or see it yet. And so our job is to attack those feelings with a little bit of so, like you said, having good emotional intelligence is getting to know your team and knowing when they're feeling good, when they're feeling fear, when they're apprehensive of what's going on or they don't know what's going on. So you attack that a little bit with logic, and you let them see a little bit of what the vision looks like. You become a cheerleader for them. You make sure that they understand that they're a big part of this and that you can't get to that point without them. So yeah, it's like Ashley said, a little bit like parenting, but not in the way that it's, childish or anything like that. It's just, you are letting them know that you have their back no matter what. You understand their fears, and you can talk to those fears and bring down apprehension. You become their cheerleader. That was pretty much what I was going to say.
I love that, John. And I think it's when you get to that level of people, there's a trust between people that's just unmatched. And I really think that's a big piece, is how much you trust each other. Leader-follower relationship can just do amazing things. I see Maria's got her hand up. Maria.
So right now that John was talking, it reminded me of that time. Sometimes I feel like we play telephone. You're not supposed to like tell anyone any changes or something that you know, but all of a sudden it's like this big rumor. So when smart staffing was changing and Joe was taking over, someone said to me, "Oh my God, Joe is taking over Kyle's job." And I was like freaking out. I was like, "What do you mean Joe's taking over?" "Yeah, he's gonna be taking over." And I was like, "Okay, Kyle, where are you going and why are you leaving me?" Like, like, why is Joe taking over? And then Kyle was like, "No, that's not what's going on. He's taking over the division, blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna be strictly HR." So going back to what John is saying, that's really important, that your leader understands, and that you understand your leader, and that your leader understands, like, you have fears. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that's just good communication and having each other's back to overcome those. I also believe that a big part of a leader is the ability to recognize strengths and to help people tap into their strengths. And the last thing I believe about leaders is there's no instructions on how to do it. That depends on each individual and their ability to just tap into each other and figure these things out together. But I think when you have the interest and the care to figure these things out, we naturally do it. And we've all followed leaders. And I would just like to hear from a couple of you. And I've already heard from Shantae. That was a great story. How about Techie? Techie, what is a leader to you, and why did you find yourself following that leader?
Personally, a leader is someone I can trust. I believe in their vision. I believe in their character, and I believe in their mission. So along that, it's somebody who has a strong vision and mission as well that I can get behind on and say, what, I can commit myself to this mission to change the world or to do something big, and um, that's who I believe a leader is, and who I will back behind. And someone I can trust with a mission, a vision that I believe in. So.
Yeah, absolutely. How about Maddie? Maddie, what is a leader to you? And why have you followed this kind of leader?
I think a big thing for me is someone who supports you in more than just work. I love that Shantae was talking about a leader that was supporting her daughter outside of work, even though he didn't know her daughter. I think that's a huge part of, we all have lives outside of work. And if you have a leader that's supporting you in growing professionally and personally, it just makes a really big difference.
Absolutely. I love that. And it is important to care about the whole person. And I wanted to come into this training today with something that I could really teach, but I really think I've just learned from all of you guys and from your different perspectives, and I appreciate all the sharing. And I think that's where a leader needs to look, is to the followers and say, what is leadership? What is leadership to you? And how can I learn from those that follow? And so I kind of think we can flip that a lot and turn and learn from our followers and become better leaders. Someone had a comment. I'm sorry, who was that?
It was me.
Go for it, Scott.
Got a second on it. I mean, I agree with it, what everyone said, but I think for me, one of the biggest things that's going to just absolutely kill my vibe with any leader is your competence level and your confidence level. And I think that those go hand in hand. And I know it's not necessarily you know, it's not on the emotional side so much, but I personally am very goal oriented and results driven. And if you're one that doesn't know what they're doing, or you seem shaky in your resolve or anything like that, then it's going to make it really hard for me to really view you as someone that I can follow. Because I don't know, I grew up very A-type personality, and if you can't do it, then I'm not going to listen to you, and I'm going to try and figure it out myself. So I think having a solid understanding of everything that you're doing, and then also the confidence that, yep, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and being able to steel yourself against things that come at you, people will notice, and they'll follow you almost instinctively, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for solid foundations.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that Shane was going after, is we bring confidence in the uncertain, right? A leader changes the uncertain future into a mission that people can get on board with. Absolutely, could not agree more with that, Scott. That's an enormous part of leadership. Ashley.
I was just going to say, I think that's what makes leadership a little complicated, is because for Scott, it's very important that things are dressed right, dressed, and you have everything down. But for someone else, like for me, for example, I really appreciate when somebody says, you know what, I don't know, but let's sort it out together. And so that's what makes leadership difficult, right? Is you may have people on your team who are very type A. You may have people on your team who respond better to the vulnerability piece. And so I think that's what makes leadership super challenging, is understanding your people and what actually connects with them.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ashley. Carrie.
Yeah, I think one other thing too that we forget as well is that leadership is not a title. You don't have to have a title to be a leader. You don't have to be a manager to be a leader. You don't have to have a position to be a leader. Again, leaders, regardless of their stature or station in the company, leaders have followers. That's all you have to base it on. Leaders have followers. So, you may be the VP of whatever in the company, but have no followers. You may be, on the front line and have a ton of followers. That leadership piece is so strong. Again, it has nothing to do with title. We sometimes get confused with that. Oh, my leader. Well, your leader could be a manager, but you don't like the manager, you don't like the person, you don't like their behavior, you don't like how they treat you. Leadership really, again, just goes back to having followers regardless of your position in any organization.
Thanks, Carrie. Joe, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I want to second that. I want to encourage all of you here to have that same message for your teams. They may not be in a leadership title, but make no mistake, they can be leaders if all they do is go out there and give a great example, go out there and help, go out there and be an individual that is the person that they come to with questions. That's a leader. And just make sure your team knows that that's how you become a great leader, is by leading by example, by being the person that is going above and beyond, by being the person that people come to with questions. And that's the type of leader that I think that we all like to follow in the first place.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Scott.
Yeah, Ashley, thanks for your comment on that. I actually wanted to clarify just some things you said made me just trigger in my mind clarification. I'm not looking for a dictator. I think that that's an important distinction. I don't need someone's like, yeah, this is what we're doing. I know what we're doing all the time, and this is what you need to do. I guess I should have better stated it, that I'm looking for an intellectual piece, an intellectual leader that is able to to be able to realize, hey, I don't know everything. So yeah, there's a vulnerability piece to that, which I completely, I agree with you 100% on. But they're intelligent enough to be able to take information that's in front of them from their team and be able to make good decisions. And I've had really dumb leaders, and I'm just like, I don't need you. I don't have any use for you. They tell me to do something, and I say, okay, well, it's probably wrong. I'm going to do it my way anyway, and it ended up being the right anyway. So as far as that goes, intelligence is, I think, a really high piece for me. Also, their ability to be able to analyze and be able to, like, I think Ted is a really great leader in this. He lists, before he goes into anything, he's like, all right, give me your thoughts. And he sits there and he listens and he calculates and he tries to formulate all these scenarios with all the information given. And then he doesn't make a decision. He's like, all right, well, what should we do about that? And then he'll listen to the group and then collectively we'll make a decision. I think that's absolutely a great example that we should follow. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify that I'm definitely not looking for a tyrant. I'm definitely one of those that you've got to be able to process on an intellectual level. Otherwise, I'm the type, I'm just either I'm not going to do what you say, or I'm just going to totally do my own thing and go rogue, so to speak.
100% agree, Scott. We've got to lead and got to navigate. We've got to make decisions together. We all have abilities to make those decisions together. And we've got to head the right directions. And that does absolutely require intelligence. I think you cannot have blind leading blind. And there's a lot of perspective and a lot we can learn from each other on that. I think the good old saying, 2 heads are better than 1, multiple heads are better than 2, right? We must intelligently navigate through the issues that we have. And it's great leaders that can intelligently do that. And I hugely agree with the competence piece. We must have competent leaders. You must be competent leaders. Otherwise, that quickly will dissolve you as a leader. I also think that there are no know-it-alls, and we need to recognize where we do not know it and seek other perspectives. I think that's also leadership. Any other thoughts? Any last thoughts to wrap up? Well,
I can chime in with something. We still have 12 minutes. I don't know if you were going to wrap up just your piece or wrap up the whole thing. So I'm like, well, we don't need to end early. But I read a book once called Multipliers, and I'd read about level 5 leaders from Jim Collins' Good to Great, and I thought that sounded great, but I wasn't quite sure what they were. And then in the book Multipliers, the author talks about, well, lots of different things, but this one part, she talks about Larry Gelwick, the guy from Highland High School in Salt Lake City, that was the this high school club, just created a rugby team, not a sanctioned sport, not anything, and they competed nationally in the U.S. And in fact, they were pretty much every year the best rugby team in the United States in any age level. And it was these high school boys from Salt Lake City that were just sort of as a club and played. And that's and they kind of won they won just year after year after year after year, and no resources, no support, no. And so she kind of gets into this stuff that they do, but at one point, and she kind of describes his leadership style and practice as, he'd just sit on a lawn chair on the side and kind of watch. And then every once in a while, he'd call a boy over and say, "Hey, come here," and he'd talk to him for a minute, and he'd be like, "You're awfully fast." And he would discover, Kyle talked about a leader identifies and helps people understand their strengths. And I think that's a big part of leadership. And so he would look at them and say, you're really fast. Boy, have you ever thought about moving from defense to attack? Because I think you'd be great. And, the kid would end up doing it and become, one of the best in the country at that position. And so I've thought, well, let me do one other tangent, and then I'll bring them both together. I have been a Scoutmaster twice in the Boy Scouts. And I went, as part of that also, I went through the training. It's called Wood Badge, that the Boy Scouts have their own leadership training thing. And anyway, so you go through the thing, and I kind of came to realize that the best Scoutmasters, there's some Scoutmasters out there that run around, you go to camp, I've been to probably 25, 30 Boy Scout camps where you go off in the woods for a week somewhere. And I mean, you go every month, but this 1 week long camp you do once a year. And some of the Scoutmasters are running around chasing the boys, trying to get it done and stuff. And then other ones, they just sit in their lawn chair at camp and kind of whittle and chill. And I think those are the good leaders. One, because they've set things up in motion. They've done stewardship delegation, things are in place. The boys are leading, which is what's supposed to happen, not an adult running around being a babysitter. And then that reminded me back of this Larry Gelwick. He wasn't running up and down the sideline screaming at people. He wasn't in every detail. It's kind of like the Ted Lasso show, if anybody's seen that. He kind of does the same thing. He just sort of sits and watches, and then he just makes this little nudge, and he just moves the team along. And I don't think leadership has to be frantic or frenetic. You kind of just watch, you observe. And I think the biggest thing is to just have people see in people their potential and their greatness that they forget about, and you remind them, and you help elevate them and lift them back. And to me, that's kind of leadership, that you do set up a structure and a process such that stuff can operate while you sit in your lawn chair. And I think that's a combination of stewardship delegation and process and structure and empowerment. I do think you see the end from the beginning to a degree, and you kind of see where you're going, and you do just slightly nudge. You don't come in and take over. You don't have to micromanage. You can just sit on the sidelines, and then you just make a slight nudge and put things back on track or towards where you're going. And then I think the third thing is you see the best in people, and you see their potential, because that's what we need. We need coaches and mentors, and we need someone that can have an outside perspective and remind us of how great we are and what we can become and what we can reach towards. And I think they help inspire and motivate and help us, and just remind us, maybe just remind us is a better word. They remind us of those things in us, and sometimes we don't even see it, so they do see it where we don't. But I like that a leader helps us. That's probably a coach role, that they really see our potential and they help us get there, so they help us grow. So those would be the three things I see: the structure, power, process, stewardship, delegation, and empowerment as one thing. Number two, I forgot number two now. And then the number three was the helping people be their best. So that's it.
Love it.
Do you mind if I ask a question here? And this is going to be actually pointed at you, Ted. Is level 5 leadership? I would love for us to maybe revisit that while we are here. You just mentioned it, and I think it'd be a good idea for us to kind of revisit what is that level 5. Would you be willing to go over that, Ted?
Yeah, and we have that in our culture documents, but I'll just give you my off-the-cuff version of it. Again, this comes from Jim Collins in their research that they did for Good to Great, the book, but it's a leader that has the indomitable will, so they are absolutely determined at all costs to accomplish what they need to accomplish. So they have indomitable will towards the goal and the ultimate success of the company. And it's all about the success of the company, not about their aggrandizement. And then you combine that with the humility and the I had the exact phrase till I made another thing. But anyway, they have the humility and the desire to make it happen, not yeah. But anyway, but it's the indomitable will with the personal humility to make it. And I lost my whole description I had in my head that I was going to do, but scatterbrain this morning. But you combine those two, and so I want the company to succeed, and it's not because I want I want to get the corporate jet, or I want to have my private chef in a lunchroom, or I don't want to, I want to get this or that. I want everybody to bow down to me, and I want you to, if we're walking to a door, you have to stop and let me go in first, or whatever. There's all this ceremony of power. It's not about the power and the ceremony. It's about, I just have humility to be open and I take responsibility. It's kind of the window in the mirror. When something goes wrong, I look in the mirror. When something's going right, it's a window, and I diffuse and deflect all the credit out to the group. And when something's wrong, that window closes or becomes into a mirror, and now it reflects back to me, and I take responsibility. So I think it's personal responsibility, personal humility, and a combination of not looking for the trappings of leadership or things for yourself. What matters is that the company succeeds, the team hits their goal, we become great and hit our potential of what it is. That whole thing is what I'm trying to describe in that personal humility piece. And then you combine with that with an absolute crushing desire and intent to succeed. It's like, we started this company and we are going to succeed. We are going to accomplish X, Y, and Z, or die trying. And there's an intense commitment to that, and a willingness to throw yourself in to say, I will lead. I will be the first in line to do this. I will be the first there in the morning, and I don't need to have all my perks and privileges, and I will take responsibility. When things go wrong, it's my fault. And so that's kind of a longer description of indomitable will plus personal humility. And that's what those are kind of an opposing, it seems. And you usually expect that the leaders have all the perks and that they're striving for the perks. And I think in these leaders, the perk is success. They want to accomplish what they set out to do, not the trappings of success and leadership and power. If anybody has any, many of you have probably read the book, so you can chime in with your piece if you have something you want to add.
I think that's well put. Thanks, Ted. Any other final comments on this? Well, thanks, everybody. I've really appreciated hearing and all of your participation today, and I've learned a lot from each of you. And that's what I've got today.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. It was really good, and it was great to hear everybody. So let's just talk about next week. And Kyle, I know that you have a couple of pieces coming up, and a lot of it's really detailed stuff. So let me just pull up the piece here, and I want to share so everybody can see the agenda and the homework assignment. Hopefully everybody has gotten their Strengths Finder assessment done. So on the screen here, we are, for everybody, I will try and make sure I give you the right chapter. But next week, again, would be first break all the rules in chapter 6, how to hold someone accountable, reprimands, termination. And Kyle, if we could, if you're okay with doing this, if we could throw in performance reviews, and there is performance review stuff in the Buckingham style as well. But the next week will be that will be our homework, the art of tough love in first break all the rules. First Break All the Rules, Chapter 6. So that's the homework piece for next week. And then there is finally at the end, Kyle, there's this last one that I have you and Joe down for, which talks about compensation and all of that. But next week is really about how do we hold someone accountable, reprimands, termination, performance reviews. If we could really kind of dig into that one, and based around Chapter 6 of First Break All the Rules. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so Chapter 6, First Break All the Rules. If I send you something different, go back to this video. You'll get the right answer. So you guys have a great weekend. Appreciate everybody. Thanks for coming on board, and we'll talk with you all real soon. Have a great day. Thanks again, Kyle.
Thank you all. We'll see you.
Goodbye.